Hello Squid Schoolers, and welcome back to Map Mode of the Day. Today, the Patreon supporters have voted that I will do the video on Skipper Pavilion Rainmaker. If you would like input on which map mode I do first, I am trying to get to all of them, but if you have one that you want to see quicker, then you can see my Patreon link in the description. Supporting me helps an awful lot. I am trying to make this my profession, and getting the finances to make that possible is a huge step in the direction of making that a reality. So thank you guys so much for considering it. If you can't support, that's just fine. Leave a like and a subscription, and that's still plenty of support for helping grow the channel. I really appreciate that too. Let's get started by talking about Rainmaker in general. We haven't done one of these videos on Rainmaker yet. In fact, we haven't done any modes other than Clam Blitz. And our discussion of the objective line is going to change because of that. In Clam Blitz, there's basically just a line straight to the enemy basket, because you want to control all of the space leading up to that point to make it safe to throw clams in. In Rainmaker, though, the area that you need to control is a lot more tight and a lot more focused, but it's also a lot more mobile. So while there is one very small and extremely important point to control, namely the space around your Rainmaker carrier, the Rainmaker carrier can move wherever they want to, and so there are actually multiple objective lines that we need to worry about. So the most common one, the one which gets you the most consistent points and gets you there the fastest, is going to be by going up here, use this for cover, then come around here, come up this wall, and go to the goal from there. That's the most common push. That's the slow and steady push. That's, we have an advantage, and we're going to try and do our best to push it as far as we can. This is, we won the fight at the beginning of the game, and we're going to start a push based on that. This is typically where you'll go. But there are a couple of other options as well that are a little bit more situational. For one thing, when you get to this point, if there's an awful lot of defense in front of you here, controlling this area, it might be more advantageous to try and push in this direction instead. This gives you an angle that is completely invisible to a player who's standing here, and it will force them to rotate in a significant way, and you'll probably get more points that way if this is the player that you're worried about. So this is another option that you have if you're going on this route. But you don't have to start in this direction either. The other major option that you have is actually to go from mid to either drop it down here and go this way to arrive at the same point, or you can also go further up, and from this point you can jump across to the slick and end up in the same place. So technically there are about 4 different ways that you're likely to take the Rainmaker, and so these are really the 4 different objective lines that you're likely to encounter. And the Rainmaker could go in some other ways. You know, they could, for example, go up this wall and go up this wall. They could, I think it's possible to actually go around this way for whatever reason you would ever want to do that. But these are the ones that give you any kind of advantage and that actually matter. So these are the ones we're going to talk about. Let's talk about how you move along the objective line in this game mode. So let's say that we have won the fight in mid and we've just picked it up. Your Slayers and Skirmishers' job is to push the zone of control of the team further along the objective line. It's going to be their job to clear out any space that can threaten the Rainmaker carrier. In Clam Blitz, the idea is just to try and push it as far forward and just keep going like this as long as you safely can. You know, ideally you'd be here at this lockout position if you were playing Clam Blitz. But it doesn't exactly work the same way in Rainmaker because the objective push is a lot more fragile. That one player is all that matters. So unlike in Clam Blitz, it can be advantageous for the enemy team to have someone do a solo flank through territory that the opponent clearly controls if it gives them shots on the Rainmaker. If the Rainmaker happens to be right here, normally you'd think, okay, so we want to be controlling this spot. So we want players here, 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 here. But if someone from the enemy team flanks in from this direction and takes out the Rainmaker carrier, the push ends right away, even though you had this powerful advanced position. In Clan Blitz, this flank isn't as scary, because you have a 3v1 or something against them with height advantage, you take them out, and then you keep going with the push. But as soon as this trade happens, the Rainmaker push is done, and everyone has to double back. They lose a ton of space, they lose a ton of time, the enemy team can respawn in. It is almost always advantageous to trade with the Rainmaker carrier, which is not true in most other modes in the game and in most other situations. Usually a trade is not what you're going to be aiming for. You're going to be aiming for surer benefit. In order to keep the Rainmaker carrier safe, what has to happen is you have to keep a tighter radius of control around the Rainmaker carrier. Typically, what I recommend is that you actually have someone either beside or behind the Rainmaker carrier at all times to defend against crazy flanks like that. You can even see this sort of play in, say, the Splat World Championships, where Ice from Starburst takes a position relatively far back with the Rainmaker carrier and effectively defends against an Inkjet that's trying to flank the Rainmaker and take it out before the push can start. This is a pretty common tactic because, again, it's really, really easy to flank the Rainmaker, and the Rainmaker isn't very good at defending itself. The Rainmaker is very slow firing. There are very easy ways, like I've said in my Rainmaker guide, that you can make it impossible for the Rainmaker to beat you because it just can't fire a shot in time. So you've got to watch out for those flanks. You've got to have someone in place who can defend against that. And it's also helpful to have someone there so that they can paint for the Rainmaker carrier. If the Rainmaker carrier doesn't have to fire a shot at all, that's its ideal situation. It just wants to swim. It just wants to get points as fast as possible, as soon as possible. If you can give it a paint trail so that it doesn't have to use that abysmally slow fire rate, it's more likely to be able to move forward. In fact, if you're a defensive player, something to consider is painting the area in front of the Rainmaker. Even without having to kill it, even without having to splat its teammates, you can still stop it in a pretty significant way because its fire rate is just so slow that by the time it has painted the area in front of it that you painted, you will have time to just paint it back. And you can stall them in place indefinitely until they put some pressure on you and get you out of that position. So that's something, again, that having someone behind or beside the Rainmaker can help to counteract. I would say that you generally want about this kind of radius, this size of radius around the Rainmaker carrier. You want this kind of control for it to ideally be able to push forward. Not too much more than that, but you do need about this much to make sure that dangerous defensive positions do not have the ability to just immediately drop on it. So for example, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, this point right here is extremely powerful, and if you try to take the Rainmaker close to it, you're likely to get dropped on or have things dropped on you or have people shoot over the top at you. It's too dangerous to advance when someone's in this position. So it is important to have someone pushing and getting to this area to flush that out. And that's the sort of thing that you're going to want a player to do away from the Rainmaker in order to secure this perimeter. Generally, as the Rainmaker moves forward, you want your Slayers, your Skirmishers, your pushing weapons to be on the perimeter of this circle. You want them to be on the circle, not necessarily in the circle, but definitely not far away from the circle. One of the most common issues that you see in Rainmaker is someone pushing too far in front of the objective. If you've got someone trying to spawn camp right here, and the Rainmaker doesn't have protection on it, it's very easy to just sneak someone out from this side, or to sneak someone in from mid, and take the Rainmaker carrier out, stop it at like 50 points, even though you kind of sort of have control of their base. Control in this map mode does not matter unless the Rainmaker is able to take advantage of it to move forward. So make sure that you're not getting so far out that you're not expecting the Rainmaker carrier to follow you when it's being slowed down by something behind you. Let's talk about weapon rolls. We've already talked about this a little bit already, but as always, it is the Slayer or Skirmisher's job to push the team further forward on the objective line. So Slayers or Skirmishers are going to start off by letting the support and backline pop the Rainmaker shield. So you presumably win a fight in mid at the very beginning of the game, and that's why you're picking the Rainmaker up, or maybe it resets and you're picking it up from there. Your job is not to pop the Rainmaker shield. Popping the Rainmaker shield takes time, and any time that you are not applying forward pressure is allowing your opponents back closer to mid. You are actually being more efficient with your time if instead of helping pop the Rainmaker shield, you are already pushing up and taking control of these positions. This right here, especially, if there's someone left in this position, the Rainmaker basically gets stalled without having a push at all. You need to clear this piece of cover for sure, because that piece of cover is really annoying if you're trying to come up this ramp. And only then can the Rainmaker push up to about here on the objective line. You also want to watch out, because occasionally with that mid fight, what'll happen is the opposing team will maybe put players into mid like this, and you'll have beaten those players and pushed them back, but maybe they also put a player in mid. And by the time this player gets into mid, they realize, oh shoot, the fight is already lost, and they just back up. Well, if the push starts going towards this objective line to the left, then the player here has the opportunity to flank by jumping from here and landing down here and flanking the Rainmaker this way. So if there was somebody in mid, if you notice that there's paint here, you want to be watching out of the corner of your eye as you come up this ramp. Is there somebody that's going to try and flank over here? Maybe throw a bomb on this location so that it paints the ground, and if it gets repainted, you can see that on the map, you know that somebody's going for that. Once you've got control of this position, now you really need to group up with your teammates and get ready for a special push. You want the Rainmaker to be about here and start firing some shots so that it can give you a little bit of extra cover fire, a little bit of pressure. And it's at this point that you really want someone to pop specials. Doesn't really matter exactly who, any number of different specials can be used to get control of this area, but you need something because you are pushing all the way uphill. You're not going to have an awful lot of cover on your way up. And this position right here is just so nasty. A lot of short-range weapons can't even hit that high. And so you're going to be pushing through a whole bunch of crossfire from people here, from people here, from people up here, from people up here as the push goes further forward. And in order to clear those spaces out, you're going to need a little bit of extra firepower. You're probably going to want somebody to pop missiles. You're going to want your backliner to pop ray, someone to pop armor. You need to throw a whole bunch of bombs at this location. This is a bit of an operation to really force players back and extend the objective line any further. At this point, the match becomes a sprint. At this point, it's can we get the Rainmaker to this wall? It's can we get the Rainmaker to lead? Can we get them safely around this corner? And that's really all that you can hope for at that point a lot of the time if you're in an evenly matched situation. If you're on defense and you're a Slayer or Skirmisher, one of your best options is, as always, to just stand from up here because you have control over, look at how much of the objective line has to pass through your range. This is a really powerful position and you have an insane height advantage. Even if you can't really use that height advantage, even if your weapon's really short range and you can only hit this radius with that weapon, you can at least throw bombs from there and still be really impactful. You can at least paint this area below you and make it really difficult for the Rainmaker to actually push their way through there. Remember, painting the Rainmaker's feet is a great way to slow it down. If you're a Skirmisher player, you're going to spend a little bit more time than most playing on this unpaintable turf, because this unpaintable turf gives you flank routes. We haven't talked an awful lot about this bottom route, because this is more of a fast break option. This is more of a, we're just going to suicide push for lead. What can work is going this way to get a quick lead of maybe 45 or something. Let's say that your opponents have pushed maybe like this far and they're at about 50 points. Getting it all the way up this ramp, if there are resisting players there, can be tricky. But if you just go this way, you're behind cover the entire time you're on this side of this wall, and then you peek out for just a second, hop down onto this tarp, and right about here, you get like 45 points. And so if this is the end of the game and your opponents only have a push to like 55 or something, literally just dropping it on the tarp here gives you a lead immediately. And that is the primary reason that you would want to push this with the Rainmaker carrier. Your movement on this tarp is so slow and so exposed and so low down that you're less likely to be able to get to this wall here where you are finally a little bit more safe and have a little bit more cover. You're a lot less likely to get there going this way than you are going up this way. But take whatever opportunities are given to you, you know? If all of your opponents are trying to defend from down here and you were able to get the Rainmaker past them, just go for it and see how far you can get. Skirmishers are more likely to take this position because the main body is expected to go this way. This is the slow, steady push. This is the most common push, which means if you want pressure from elsewhere, what you're going to want to do is put somebody in on this side. And you may not need that kind of pressure because it may be that you need all of the pressure to be focused on this area right here to dislodge that. Maybe you need your ink jetter to go up over the top. Maybe you need rain over this. Maybe you need missiles over this because this is just so threatening. But if, for example, there's someone in this position that's giving you trouble and they're not paying enough attention on their right, sometimes they can get flanked by someone who sneaks up behind them and hits them from behind like this. It's a relatively common roller play. It's very sus trying to push up this ramp. I'm not gonna lie, I almost never do this. Every time I try to do it, I typically get shot out for it. But it's an option that's there for you if you're trying to skirmish and you need another way in. Supports. Previously, we were talking about how your job is to paint up and keep map control as soon as it gets pushed forward by the Slayers and Skirmishers. And that is still a very valuable part of your skill set, but at some point somebody has to pick up the Rainmaker. And as it turns out, your weapon is the best suited weapon to doing that. So typically what's going to happen is during the fight over mid, during a neutral engagement, you are going to play as you usually do. You secure the zone that is pushed forward by your Slayers, you help them in fights by throwing bombs, maybe use a special if you need to, but if you still have special by the time the Rainmaker is popped, your job is to pop the Rainmaker while your Slayers push up in front of you, and then if you're, say, like a junior or a zap, you're an armor support, you pop that armor and then pick up the Rainmaker. The reason you do that is that if you pick up the Rainmaker while you still have special, your team will never get use of that special. It will never be useful. You will either be splatted or the game will end by KO. Those are the only two options when you pick up the Rainmaker, because you can't use specials, you can't use subs, you can't use your normal main weapon, and so you'll get splatted and lose the special anyway as soon as you pick it up. Might as well just use it now and then pick up the Rainmaker. The reason it's best for the support to pick up the Rainmaker is that you want the weapon that is going to have the least amount of impact in pushing the objective line forward on the Rainmaker. Because the Rainmaker's not going to give you a lot of that impact. The Rainmaker is very, very slow. It can apply pressure and flush people out into positions where your Slayer and Skirmisher can deal with them, but it's never going to be able to really push effectively by itself. And something like a Junior, with the amount of aim RNG that it has, with the short range that it has, it's the least effective fighting weapon on most of the teams that it's on. So just put the Junior on the Rainmaker and have them carry it forward. Occasionally, you might instead want the Backliner to carry it, maybe if your support is a little bit more aggressive and stands a better chance of being able to help out. But Backlines can be really helpful if they take positions to help them dislodge powerful defensive positions. Backliners are also really important to not carry the Rainmaker if they have Stingray, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Stingray is such a powerful special in this game mode that you really do not want to be sacrificing a Stingray just so that that person can carry the Rainmaker. But there is also an argument for putting the backline on the Rainmaker carrier because the Rainmaker carrier is also turning into a backline weapon, basically. They are going to be worse at pushing forward. They're going to have a powerful shot, and it's going to be able to control some space and flush people out, just like a backliner would. But it's also not going to be able to push forward as quickly. And having double backline is typically not a good team comp, especially in a mode like Rainmaker. So you might as well, have the backliner stay being a backliner and not force your junior player to also be a backliner. So those are the usual schools of thought about it. That said, if the Rainmaker is 5 points from lead, and you see it unpopped right in front of you with paint that you can swim through, I don't care who you are, you pick up the Rainmaker and you push for lead. As long as it's not like a push to 85 or something that doesn't matter and will literally be the easiest thing in the world to push as soon as you get any real advantage. Don't suicide for a push to 85, but if it's at 33 and you need 31 to get lead, I don't care if you're a Slayer, I don't care if you're a Skirmisher, go for it. Go get those points and secure the lead for your team. Do what it's going to take in that moment to win the game on that push. Typically, though, if it's a fight you won in mid, you get the opportunity to choose who's going to pick that up. And so, ideally, Slayers and Skirmishers push forward while the pop is happening, so that by the time the pop has already happened, the support is already free to move up to about here. And we're already eyeing these positions as the Slayer and Skirmisher. Backline. Here is Devi's positioning map, as we've talked about before. Remember, red positions are traditional offensive positions, purple positions are traditional defensive positions, and then the blue ones are some non-traditional positions that Devi likes to take in particular. Note that she plays Hydra Splatling, so different weapons may get different mileage out of taking those positions than she does, but should be at least a good reference point. You can kind of think about it differently depending on whether that backliner has Stingray. Stingray has always been an extremely powerful special in Rainmaker for its potential to stop pushes from defense, even in very disadvantaged situations. If there is one player up on the enemy team, but that player has a Stingray, they stand a pretty good chance of being able to stop the push by themselves. Because the Stingray user is probably going to stand right about here. They're going to jump back to spawn if they need to, and just use the Stingray out in this direction. And they've got good line of sight. They only really have to worry about, like, this radius right here. They don't have to aim very far, and there's only so much room that the Rainmaker has to dodge around. So that's a relatively easy ray to hit. What's the counter to a defensive Stingray? An offensive Stingray. As soon as this ray fires up, at top level, the answer is fire up your own Stingray from down here. You see this in the Splat World Championships match. In fact, one of the pivotal moments of that match that Starburst played is when Ice, from here, Stingrays this area to clear it out, and the team is able to start pushing, and they get it to about here. But there is a Squeezer player who is able to take Ice out from this flank, and then immediately turns around and Stingrays back the other way, and is able to stop the push 1 point before it gets to lead. It's a very niche situation, but those kinds of plays where the Stingray is the entire deciding factor in how well the push goes are extremely common. So it merits talking about Stingray a little bit separately. The defensive Stingray is one of the biggest endgame win conditions. If you have Stingray and the lead with 45 seconds left in the game, just play incredibly safe. Do not take any risks. Do not position very far forward at all. Let them take space up to a certain point. And then, at the very end, while you have been spending your time just painting their feet, throwing bombs in front of them, when you pop that ray, it's game over. What that means for you as the backliner is that you need to be playing around that ray and playing to stay alive and keep that ray for when your team needs it, either to push forward and clear this area, or to defend against an enemy team's Stingray user as well. Stingraying this area isn't bad at all, especially if there's no Stingray user on the other team, because this is relatively easy to hit from down here with the Stingray, and it's a level of pressure that you can put on that will make it safe for your Skirmishers and Slayers to push up in this direction. Skirmishers and Slayers, as soon as you see any kind of special being launched at this area, that's your cue. That's your time to throw some bombs up there, to try and push your way up there, to try and clear this out, because you're not going to get that many other chances. As the backline user, if you're not playing around a ray right this second, you have a couple of ideas. One of those ideas with the ultra backline weapons, like a Hydra or an E-Leader, are to position actually in mid and crossfire over here, and that clears this player out of position. You might be able to drop down and get around and help out, You usually don't want to be pushing in this direction over to here, just because you don't have any advantages over those ledges. But those are some ways that the ultra backline weapons can actually have an impact on this zone right here and stay in play from a position that's a little bit safer for them. But a lot of the time, what you'll also want to be doing is using your range to hit this area from below, just like the Rainmaker might be trying to. And that amount of cover fire can also be hugely helpful in getting the Rainmaker pushed forward. Typically, though, you want your backliner to be more of a mobile type of weapon. You're more often going to see something like a Jet Squelcher in Rainmaker because it can move back and forth. It can adjust more quickly to the objective line going a different way than you thought it was going to go. All right, let's talk about key positions. Like we mentioned before, this area, extremely important to pressure and hold down when you're pushing in, because it just has too much control over this area. Another really important position to control before that, then, is this, because from here, you can completely stop this upper Rainmaker push before it gets any points. That's why the Slayers and Skirmishers need to be moving off the Rainmaker rather than trying to pop it, so that they can make sure that this area is secure before the Rainmaker tries to go anywhere. Because somebody being in this position is going to stall the Rainmaker from even starting to push at all. It's not going to be able to make any progress as soon as it is picked up if you've got someone positioned up here. Another interesting position is this one. It's powerful in theory. The issue is that a lot of the time, a Rainmaker push never actually gets so far that this position matters. But this position can see both this leg of the push and this leg of the push. Whichever direction you go, it can have at least a little bit of an impact if you're standing right here. This is one of the few places where you can actually hit someone off of this back wall as they're trying to climb up to the Rainmaker pedestal. So that is a position to take if things are really going badly, if the opponent is threatening to KO. That's something to think about. Also remember, at any point in time, somebody could just flank from mid over this statue by jumping across. So if you're not watching that, you're making yourself susceptible to something like a Slayer Skirmisher type running through mid and coming in behind the enemy team, behind the objective line. Also, obviously, if the enemy team is starting to move the Rainmaker in this direction, if they've chosen this objective line, now all of a sudden you want to defend mid. You want to get control of this area. So this position right here can really shut that down very quickly, and the reason I put it behind is so that you can right side peek around it. This position is really important because it gives you a little bit of high ground, and it prevents them from being able to use the jump here. This position is better for a longer ranged weapon. If you have a good angle, you can potentially get some picks on people who are trying to push up and make room for the Rainmaker to drop down in this direction. So those are some good defensive positions. I would highly advise against doing very much at all in this area. You can see the objective lines are entirely outside of this area that I've just drawn a circle around. You are completely having no impact on the match, unless, and this is the only scenario that you can do literally anything, you are farming for special and about to pop something like a Stingray on them. If you need an emergency Stingray and you just don't have safe paint to go for, maybe this is a call? Maybe. I say maybe, because even then, you're still physically out of position. You would have to move, at best, from here, maybe down to here, before you're going to be able to threaten anything on the objective line. I would argue it's usually best to just take paint in front of you that's actually going to be strategically useful and use that to get your Stingray most of the time. But if, you don't have an awful lot that's not painted your color, but you need a Stingray really soon, it can be a good idea in the last minute or so to roll out from spawn, come out here, and just take this safe paint while you can have it, and that's a good way to get one of those game-ending specials. Remember that it is there as kind of a reservoir, a resource for you to be able to use in the event that you do need a special and it doesn't matter where you are on the map for the next 10 seconds or so. Main goals. Your first goal, of course, is to win the fight in mid. This rectangle right here ends up being really important. Use this cover to your advantage, use this cover to your advantage. Make sure that people aren't threatening to flank you through mid like this and try and clear you out from here, because if they do this, this does paint up a lot behind you, and it gives the Rainmaker a path that it can really quickly start pushing again. So you've got to watch out for those kinds of moves while you're in the mid fight. But until the Rainmaker gets reset back to neutral, that's typically not going to be a way that the two teams fight over it anymore after that is done. Usually it's going to be pushed over to one side, and at that point, the defense is just going to try and put up this kind of wall right here. Once you have the objective under your control, once you've maybe won that fight in mid, again, your objective is to clear out this territory, and that's when the Rainmaker moves up to here. Then the Rainmaker moves up to about here, and now you need to control about this much. Then the Rainmaker moves up to here, and you need to extend it to be about this much. And at this point, your goal is to somehow do whatever you need to do to get the Rainmaker sprinted to this wall, get it up the wall and up the pedestal as quickly as you possibly can. This wall is the best place to be getting to. Second best option is probably to go up this wall and then go up this wall. I would say that this route is a distant third option to those two, because it takes until about maybe here where you're starting to get down into the low teens, which is where you are even partway up the wall here. Going up this way, you're pushing uphill against someone who might be able to see you. So you only want to go here if you know that the defense is centralized on this side of the map. But on this wall, you get cover the entire way up the wall. They don't have a great angle on you unless they're taking maybe this position. So your goal is to get to this wall the vast majority of your pushes. Overall, make sure you're doing what it is going to take to win the game on that push. It doesn't matter if you push your points forward if you're still not in the lead. If your opponents have 31 and you push to 33, the only way that that push matters at all is if you are able to repop the Rainmaker, pick it up, and get the lead. Progress does not exist in the sense that, oh, well, hey, we made it to 33, that's good points. No, it's not good points. You're losing. You need to get to 30 in that situation. So do whatever it takes to get you there, and then maybe focus on prolonging the push after that, or getting whatever extra points you can. At that point, it's a lot more defensible to just run the Rainmaker in, knowing you're going to get splatted. Thank you, everybody, for watching our map mode of the day. Again, if you would like any input on which map mode I do next, I give that option to my Patreon supporters. I have a poll that I put out whenever I need that new information, and they get to pick for me. So I would really appreciate the support. It helps a lot with being able to make this channel go long term. But like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be back next time very soon with another one. Next one, Moray Rainmaker. That very weird, very interesting map. I'm looking forward to making it, and I hope you're looking forward to watching it. We'll catch you next time.